I think there's a general agreement that the current student loan financing system, I should say the college education system, the way we pay for it, primarily through student loans, leaves a lot to be desired. But the Biden administration appears to be going out on a limb by proposing to do things through administrative action or executive orders, or, in the case of the most recent proposal, through a Federal Register notice. But the pushback that they're now getting, I mean, to sort of recap, I mean, last year they proposed to write off student loan debt up to $10,000 to $20,000 per student. And then beginning of this year, they proposed an income-related repayment plan, essentially allowing students to pay back as little as 5% of their income toward repaying their loan. And a lot of the analysis that's come out has suggested that a majority of the students who borrow money for college would pay little or nothing toward repaying their debt under this new proposal. And so there's been a lot of pushback, and there's been some suggestions that perhaps neither of these programs are complying with the statutory intent or statutory construction or legislative intent. And of course, the student debt forgiveness is being challenged, and the Supreme Court is supposed to hear that case, I think, at the end of this month. So, given the controversy and the cost, I mean, I failed to mention that both of these proposals, on a combined basis, assuming, what sort of behavioral effects you take into account in terms of how many students would borrow more money under the additional subsidies, you're looking at as much as $1 trillion in loan forgiveness, debt forgiveness under these two proposals combined. So given the cost involved in the controversy that has arisen, is there some room for a bipartisan compromise that would actually help students make college more affordable, but wouldn't have the price tag that appears to be associated with the president's proposals?
Yeah, so when I was writing the Peterson piece, this was sort of my dark horse idea for opportunity for bipartisan policymaking, because on the surface it does seem very charged and very partisan. But I think, as you said, the president's student debt cancellation executive order not likely to survive the court challenge. There are going to be these issues with the implementation of the income-driven repayment plan. So I think the administration and Democrats, having not been able to deliver this debt cancellation, will be looking for alternative ways to do a college affordability win. At the same time, I think there is something that should bring Republicans to the table, which is up until now, President Biden and before him, President Trump, were doing by executive action a freeze on repayments and interest accrual. And it was ostensibly a COVID relief measure, but they kept extending it long past when they said the public health crisis, the epidemic, was over. So I think and that's not going to be overturned by the court, I don't think there's much of a chance of that. So I think for Republicans, there is this appeal of reining in this executive this executive discretion to kind of more conform with what it was originally supposed to be. And from the Democratic perspective, it is an opportunity to deliver real relief, which I think gets to the third thing, which both sides, I would hope, agree on. And that's, debt cancellation is really more of a Band-Aid than a solution. The ultimate problem here is the growth of tuition costs and the out of control inflation in the higher education sector. And that's something that it's going to be very difficult for the administration to do by executive action, even if they wanted to. I don't think there's really been any proposal for it the way we had this debt cancellation proposal. But at the same time, if you're just funneling more money with these open-ended subsidies to higher education institutions, that's going to make the problem of skyrocketing tuition worse, not better. And so if you're able to address the real root driver of the cost, that will make the programs cheaper, which I think is a Republican priority, and it will lower costs for students, which is the Democratic priority. So I think in a weird way, we could see there being an opening for this grand bargain on higher education. We'll see if it actually happens, but I think it's something that that is not getting the consideration that maybe it deserves because of how charged it's been up to this point.
So is there a specific proposal that you have in mind? I mean, we talked about this on a previous show, and one of the guests suggested that, similar to the way we do home loans, that if you're a bank and you loan money for a mortgage, that you're required to retain a certain share of the mortgages on your bank balance sheet, because that makes you more vigilant in terms of controlling cost and making sure you have good credit-worthy borrowers. And he suggested perhaps that the colleges themselves should have more skin in the game, that instead of all the loans being passed off to the federal government, that the colleges themselves should hold on to some of the student loans and give them an incentive to manage the program and control costs better. I mean, is that something you would consider, or do you have another idea?
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. You have to have more accountability from schools. One of the concerns that I know there is with that plan is that there's a risk of it creating a selection problem where schools stop taking let's say higher risk students who they think are more likely to not make it through the program, and that closing off opportunity from some disadvantaged students or students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I think there have to be ways to mitigate that, and I think we also need to be providing more good non-college pathways to good jobs, because the fact is that if it doesn't benefit anybody, not even the student, if we have students going to college for whom it's not a good fit and then they drop out, and even if they didn't graduate with any debt, that's years of their life that's gone that could have been getting trained for a job that would have been more satisfying and lucrative for them, and it's lost resources on the school's part and the taxpayers' part. So I think if we can provide more good non-traditional degree pathways to good jobs, combined with more accountability for the schools and scholarship opportunities, I think that's a good starting point for what these reforms would look like.